Huston emerged in 1836 at the confluence of Buffalo Bayou and White Oak Bayou, a location chosen by its founders for practical reasons of water access and transportation. The city's early position as a port settlement, even inland, meant that waterways dictated the initial street layout and building placement. This geography of bayous would prove fundamental to how the city would grow, constrain itself, and ultimately reinvent itself across nearly 2 centuries. The earliest architecture of Huston reflected the pragmatic needs of a frontier settlement. Simple wooden structures and basic masonry buildings dominated. The 1830s and 1840s, constructed with locally available materials and built to withstand the region's humid subtropical climate. The city's grid street plan, laid out by the founders, followed the rational, ordering principles common to American towns of that era. As Huston transitioned from town to city in the decades following the Civil War, brick and stone began to replace wood as the preferred building material, a shift driven both by improved transportation of materials and by concerns about fire safety in an increasingly dense urban core. The late 19th century brought new architectural languages to Huston. Victorian commercial buildings, with their ornamental facades and multi-story designs, rose along Main Street and in the downtown district. The availability of cast iron for structural elements allowed builders to create larger window openings and taller structures. These downtown commercial blocks reflected Huston's growing confidence as a regional economic center. Linked by rail to distant markets and served by an expanding labor force, the discovery of oil near Beaumont in 1901 fundamentally altered Huston's trajectory. The city's position as a natural hub for petroleum refining and petrochemical manufacturing transformed it from a regional merchant center into an industrial engine. The architectural consequences were profound. New warehouse districts, industrial facilities, and transportation infrastructure sprawled outward from the core. Worker housing spread into surrounding neighborhoods, initially in modest shotgun houses and worker cottages, then progressively in more substantial residential areas as the industry matured and wealth accumulated. The early 20th century saw the arrival of Art Deco and streamlined modern styles in Huston's downtown. Office towers and commercial buildings adopted the geometric ornamentation and vertical emphasis characteristic of these movements. The city's skyline began to show ambition and verticality, reflecting both national architectural trends and local economic optimism. Simultaneously, the expansion of streetcar networks enabled suburban development, particularly toward the west and south, establishing neighborhoods that would shape the city's identity for generations to come. The post-World War II era marked perhaps the most decisive transformation of Huston's built environment. The city experienced explosive population growth fueled by continued oil and petrochemical expansion, defense industry activity, and migration from rural areas. Architectural patterns shifted dramatically toward single-family residential development. Enabled by widespread automobile ownership and the absence of strict zoning restrictions, the bungalow and ranch house styles became dominant residential forms, spreading across vast tracts of newly developed land. Commercial strips and shopping centers emerged along major thoroughfares, reflecting the automobile-centered planning that increasingly organized the metropolitan landscape. The 1960s and 1970s brought modernist principles to Huston's downtown. Glass and steel office towers rose in geometric forms, expressing the corporate ambitions of energy companies headquartered in the city. The Huston Petroleum Club, various bank headquarters, corporate towers adopted the international style, creating a collection of modernist structures that defined the skyline of that era. These buildings represented both a break from historical continuity and a statement of technological confidence characteristic of the period. Huston's lack of comprehensive zoning regulations, unique among major American cities, produced a distinctive urban form. Unlike cities with strict separation of residential, commercial, and industrial uses, Huston allowed a mixed and sometimes chaotic juxtaposition of different building types. Industrial facilities could stand next to residential neighborhoods. Commercial development could interrupt the residential fabric. This absence of formal planning constraints, viewed by some as a liability and by others as an advantage, shaped every period of the city's growth and created a fundamentally different urban texture than that of peer cities. Suburban expansion accelerated through the 1980s and 1990s, with residential development pushing ever outward. New residential neighborhoods adopted various stylistic references: neo-colonial, Mediterranean revival, and contemporary forms, while maintaining consistent patterns of low density. Automobile-dependent settlement. Shopping malls and office parks established new commercial centers along outer ring roads and major corridors, creating a polycentric metropolitan region rather than a single dominant downtown district. The early 21st century brought new architectural awareness to Houston's historical layers. Adaptive reuse projects began converting older warehouse districts and industrial areas into mixed-use neighborhoods. The warehouse district, once devoted entirely to storage and rail-served industry, gradually accommodated loft apartments, galleries, and restaurants in converted brick structures. Conservation efforts identified and protected significant older buildings. Recognizing the architectural and historical value of the city's earlier periods, through each phase of transformation from frontier settlement to mercantile city, to oil industry metropolis, to sprawling automobile-centered region, Houston's architecture recorded the decisions, constraints, and aspirations of each era. The wooden structures of the 1830s no longer stand, but their successors in brick and then steel and glass continued the story of a city responding to geography, economics, and technological possibility. The bayous that determined the city's founding location remain, winding through neighborhoods and districts shaped across generations. The architectural past of Houston persists not as a preserved museum but as an active presence embedded in neighborhoods, street patterns, and the layered urban fabric. Each building type and district carries forward the logic of its era, while existing alongside structures and patterns from very different times. This continuity, the presence of many pasts within the present city, forms the architectural character of Houston, a record written in buildings and streets of how a frontier outpost became a modern metropolis.